Hello, folks. How's it going, eh? You might recognize me from my hit show on Rebel Media called How's It Going, eh? And no, Talib, that doesn't mean that it's associated with the rebel flag and the Confederates. That's what the word rebel means to you, but I'm afraid it's got quite a storied past. You may want to check out the etymology of that word before you put a noose on every single noun that makes you feel slightly uncomfortable. Sorry, guy. You don't own the word rebel. Anyway. But here's a little thing I noticed, and as an outsider, as a Canuck coming down to Canada, coming down to America from Canada, where 90% of what we argue about is French versus English. Occasionally, we'll get into Indians, but for the most part, their race is number 376 on the list. So you come down here and you see everyone freaking out about slavery from 400 years ago, and you go, geez, guys, move on. It seems like a weird thing to focus on. We got Armenian genocides, you got the Scots and the Irish having all their land taken, but you're really dwelling on something that is long, long gone. There's been plenty of plagues and wars and all kinds of crusades you could throw in there. Anyway, seems like a crutch to dwell, but we got this thing called the Black Lives Matter movement down here, and it's a good wording of a thing. It's sort of like when you say pro-choice, because to be against them, it's like you got to say that black lives don't matter. Well, black lives matter plenty. So that's why a lot of these demands seem insane, but they're protesting all over the country. They're protesting in City Hall here in New York. They'd like the NYPD to be shut down completely. I don't even think back in the Serpico days they were talking about stuff like that. But anyway, they've released their demands, and I'd like to go through them. I think they got a bunch of money. And when you get a bunch of money, you need sort of to talk to a lawyer and get a list going. You got to get some paperwork together. So they go, okay, let's throw together some terms. And God, can you imagine the meeting they had? I went to some of these undercover for James O'Keefe, and there's a lot of, everyone in the room has to get up and say their name, where they're from. It's real dull, and it goes on and on and on. At least at right-wing meetings, you get to the juice nice and quick. Get to the middle of the Tootsie Roll pop, as little Kim would say. Anyway, here's number one. End the war on black people. I love this one. Okay, you want to end the war on black people? Coming up. I'm a magic wizard. You want to live in a country where cops are not hunting down black people for no reason? In a world, not a world, let's focus on North America. You want to live in a continent where there's no particular attack going on blacks, and anything you can find could be easily counteracted by blacks attacking white people? Okay, ready? Done. Go outside. Birds are chirping. If you come across a cop, he's not going to shoot you. And if you resist arrest, things might get a little hairy. That's the same for all of us, folks. That's why white people get killed more in proportion to the representation of the population and the number of violent crimes they commit. They get killed more than black people. Here's a tip, guys, black Americans. Seethe. You're being arrested. You don't think it's fair? Do what we do. Seethe. You fucking son of a bitch. I swear to God. Oh, my God. I'm going to fucking sue you so bad. Put your heads behind your back and hate the guy. That's what I do. So that's number one solved. Number two, here's a doozy. Reparations for past and continuing harms. Now, I guess they sort of went reparations for something, and then they went, oh, geez, that was several hundred years ago. That tangle. I saw the movie Braveheart, and I realized there's a lot that's been going on if you go too far back. Let's just make it everything like the 50s, too. And the German Shepherds fighting the guys. We want money for that. That's absurd. It's impossible to facilitate. It's sort of like with Donald Trump when he goes, we want to put a moratorium on Muslims, and they go coming into the country, and they go, how do you know they're Muslim? And we go, I don't know. And then people go, your plan is too hard to institute. How do you institute reparations? What about an octoroon from Liberia who got here a week ago? What about someone who is black technically, but looks totally white? And you're stunned to find out that they're white. Like that dude, Jesse Williams. He could pass for white, especially if he had a baseball hat on. But anyway, Jim Goad, I think it was Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote an article in The Atlantic defending reparations. And the bigotry of low expectations is so nuts in this country that anytime someone writes something even that stupid, if they have a name like Ta-Nehisi Coates, everyone goes, good boy, yeah, that's a good article. That's plausible, sure. Anyway, Jim Goat at Tacky Mag took it to task. And here's the best paragraph, just sort of sums up the whole argument for reparations. And the short version is, you already got him, so we're good. But let's bust out the long version. The estimates I've seen regarding what the next value of black American slaves in 1860 would translate to in current dollars range from 1.75 trillion to 10 trillion. That's quite a range. Writing in Forbes, some white guy reckons America's net wealth is somewhere around 80 trillion. Isn't it amazing, by the way, that Obama's got into a situation where we're at 20 trillion? Our worth is only 80, and we're at 20. That's pretty bad. That's a quarter of our worth is in debt. Adding that even if slavery reparations are righteously due, they would amount to around and about the current cost of food stamps. You see, since total American annual welfare spending is now around $1 trillion, and since the country has spent trillions in welfare since the 50s, and since blacks chew up a disproportionate amount of welfare expenditures, it's possible. You're allowed to be interrogative in this country. I'm sorry. First Amendment, free speech. Cliven Bundy wondered. He was vilified. Larry Summers fired from Harvard for posing a question. But you're allowed to say things are possible. It's possible that the reparations may have already been paid, with interest even. Thank you, Jim. All right, so that's number 2 taken care of. We're doing well here. We're down to only 4 valid points. Number 3, divestment from the institutions that criminalize, cage, and harm black people, and investment in the education, health, and safety of black people. Okay. The investment in education thing is actually the worst thing you can do for blacks. So you seem to have a 3A and B here. Let's do 3B first. Money for academia, for education spending has been going up at 45 degrees since the 50s. Test scores have been totally linear. They have not been budging. You know what's budging test scores, especially in Harlem and black areas? Charter schools. Charter schools are thriving in Harlem, despite the New York Times not wanting you to think that. And one of the reasons they thrive is because they adapt to the market, and they notice a lot of these kids in Harlem don't have dads, so they become the dad, and they enforce discipline. These places in Harlem are like military schools. If you're in a fancy area, there aren't a lot of charter schools, but if they are, it's relatively normal. It looks like a cheap private school. But in Harlem and in tough areas, they make them do push-ups, they make them run laps, they get sent home if they're not wearing their uniform. The teacher will come to your house. I met a guy who runs a charter school in Harlem. He went to a kid's house because they weren't there because they didn't have the uniform, found the uniform in the dirty laundry pile, went and washed it and got her to school. That's what poor America needs, that's what black America needs, and that's what's working. So investment in education is the worst thing you can do for education. The free market does a much better job. That's 3B handled. 3A, divestment from the institutions that criminalize, cage, and harm black people. Just kidding. That's a totally accurate point and a major problem in America. 2.2 million people in jail, and all drugs, as far as I'm concerned. If you weren't doing drugs, you were defending turf, you were trying to rob a drug dealer, you've never done drugs in your life, but you figured that would be a good person to rob. I interview these guys all the time, and the common thread with rich, poor, black, white is drugs. Legalize drugs. Okay, get these people out of there. Obama just released, 214 people from prison? The Republicans and the right are freaking out. Good. I'm glad they're gone. There's so many fake domestics in there where a woman calls the cops on a guy for hitting her, then they get back together, then she calls the cops a year later because they have another argument, and even though he has a sock drawer there, he gets sent away because he has a restraining order, and it's just like he crawled through the window and attacked her, just like a stalker. That's what the law says. He's in jail. Get those guys out of jail. Get these dumb gun laws out of jail. 2.2 million people. I would argue, my guess is about 5% of the population is totally incompatible with society. But with welfare, you've shattered the black family. With this dumb drug war, you've made all these people illegal when they're just adhering to a market that's there. Everyone's going to buy cocaine no matter what you do. And with welfare, you've shattered this black family where idle hands mean, I don't know, I'm going to get up to mischief. I have no discipline and I'm bored. You know, back when we had black families, back in the 50s and 60s, they tended to commit crimes about the same as whites. It's not blackness that's making them commit crimes. It's you meddling in their lives. So, number 3A, totally valid. I want that one to stay on the list. They have one good point. Number 4, economic justice for all and a reconstruction of the economy to ensure our communities. These are long, by the way, long. You got to keep it snappy here. So economic justice, that's all it should say. But anyway, economic justice for all and a reconstruction of the economy to ensure our communities have collective ownership, not merely access. This reminds me, by the way, this term reconstruction, doesn't that sound kind of weird? It sounds like you think the government is a soundboard in a music studio, and you can just go, turn up the equality, turn down the prosperity. Oh, Warren Buffett's a little too high, let's turn him down, and let's turn up successful blacks and get them having PhDs. You have, that is totally true of a soundboard. You do have that kind of control with the bass and the treble, or whatever they call it. The government is not a soundboard, okay? The government is the DMV. The White House is just the same people who renew your driver's license and make you wait in line and hold a number, and the numbers aren't even in order. 904B, and then it's number 86, and you go, who is running this thing? Bureaucrats are, with no incentive. So your whole idea that you can have reconstruction and the economic justice in the economy, that's Bernie Sanders crap, and it's not true. We just had Obama sending a secret pallet of $400 million to Iranians. He blew $500 million on Solyndra. Remember they lost another giant pallet going to Iraq? I forget how much that was. I think it was in the billions. When you give money to the government, you're just throwing money into a paper shredder. They can't just magically turn up your justice. That's insane. And the other thing that disturbs me about this term reconstruction is it reminds me of Jesse Williams when he said, we are going to have, he had that stupid minister voice he does, we are going to have equal rights and justice in our country, or we will restructure their function and ours. We will restructure their function. Again, there's this idea of this Maoist control. And I think it's George Soros brainwashing Black Lives Matter into thinking that Stalinism is an effective political tool. We'll restructure things, or we'll kill all the police, or even this dumb demonstration with the wanting to shut down the entire NYPD. Who do I call when some crackhead starts stabbing everyone on the subway? I get a posse together and we round him up and we lynch him? That's the way it used to go. Mika Johnson, by the way, really liked that term. We are going to have to restructure their function. And the Blaze had a thing with his dad where he goes, yeah, that really struck a chord with Mika. Way to go, Jesse. Great speech. So no, number 4 doesn't work. The free market is better off for everyone. FDR's New Deal was a great example of that. He just said, I'm going to wipe out Harlem because it's a blight and I'm going to rebuild a much better place. Then he never got around to it. And they were totally abandoned. That's not 400 years ago. That's like half a century ago. So that brings us to number 5, community control of the laws, institutions, and policies that most impact us. This is also a kind of a good point. Do you remember Joyce Alexander? She was a woman in Florida who wrote all over her daughter's shirt. She said, ain't got no time for that. Don't be talking to me. I got time for you and my friends. I got to focus on my school. And then on the back it said, my grades suck and I got to focus on getting my grades up and don't talk to me in the hallways. I got to get to class. She was totally humiliated by that shirt. And if some rich white person in Greenwich did it, it would have a totally different context. But what most people, and libertarians are especially guilty of this, what most people are unable to accept is that blacks have essentially set up a 5th column. They have a different culture. They have collard greens on Thanksgiving and stuff. And with that different culture, I don't want to say should have a different set of rules because that's insane. I mean, Bill Clinton said that Indians can do drugs, they can have peyote, and no one else can. So there are race-based laws, but that seems like a slippery slope into total segregation. I don't know how I feel about this, but I do know that different laws should be applied differently. And maybe this is the police's job. You know, back if we had beat cops, they would know the area and they'd know, I'm not going to enforce this law here. It doesn't make sense. You know, in New York State, it's illegal to walk down the street with an ice cream cone in your pocket, in your back pocket. Don't enforce that. Giuliani was enforcing a cabaret law from the 1800s where it was illegal for more than 2 people to dance in dancey gestures if the club didn't have a dancing license. So we had people going to court dancing. The cops have a lot of responsibility when it comes to what laws to enforce because there's almost an infinite number of laws. So with Joyce Alexander, they took her daughter away They didn't get that although shame might be a cruel trick for the upper middle class, for the bourgeoisie, in the hood, it's actually a very effective tool. And she was doing the right thing for her daughter. She's one of the only welfare queens, I'm assuming she's a welfare queen, who cares about her daughter and wants to help her get educated and get her out of the hood. And you get in there with your white laws and metal? That ain't right. And we also saw this in the documentary Dogfight, where Dada 5000 was having backyard fighting. Now, there's no medics there. You can easily die. It's a horrific act. You see guys with their eye sockets hanging out from these fights, and you go, well, that should be illegal. It should be illegal in Nantucket and in Berkeley and in Madison, Wisconsin. This is a different set of, this is in, what was it, West Perrine, Florida, I believe. Blacks are dying every day there. It's like East New York. So what was happening with these backyard fights is they were generating money. They started a league for this fight where people could move up and get, you know, your heavyweight, the equivalent of your heavyweight belt. And they had different fights and different bouts, and they sold food and they sold drinks. And it was a great way for the community to get together. And these guys were settling their gripes in the backyards instead of killing each other. So by shutting that down, you shut down an entrepreneur that wasn't doing any harm, and you were preventing, those fights were preventing deaths, believe it or not. It looks gory to the bourgeoisie. It looks gory to an academic who's used to just reading about crime. But in the real world, in the hood, in impoverished Florida, it was a great solution. So I don't know how to institute this, but there is a lot of merit to the idea of different laws being applied differently to different cultures. That's 2 points you got. And that brings us to number 6. Now, I have a theory about number 6. I think there was a lot of broads at this meeting, and they go, what the hell's going on? All of these, all 1 to 5 was all you brothers. I want to have one. How come we don't got one? We sitting here, we come up with all these great ideas, and you didn't list one. And I think they went, okay, but this is really important, and we got a lot of people listening to us. Can you at least make it make sense? Like, a lot of these were good. In fact, even Gavin McInnes, a Canadian hoser cynic, he likes 2 of these. So please, just if we could have 3 out of 6 good ones, that would be great. Please make it a good one. And by the way, 5 and 10 are great numbers. 6 is a weird number. It actually sounds satanic. So this better be good. This is what they come up with. Independent black political power and black self-determination in all areas of society. I think that means more black leaders. And I think we've learned that that's not really a great idea. In fact, most black-run cities are a total hellhole. Detroit being a great example, Baltimore being another. And those are bad for blacks. And it's not because black politicians are inherently bad, but it's because when you put race over meritocracy and you hire a politician just because of his race, you're not necessarily going to get a good one. I mean, in Atlanta, they have a guy who thinks Guam will capsize. He thinks it will flip over if you add too many people to it, too many American soldiers. We've got. I think it was in Florida. We had that rapper Hurricane come over to the House, or whatever you call it, the Speaker House. What was it? The House of Commons, the public area where they do their politicking, and sing his hit Halle Berry, blaring out of bass speakers. Boof, boof, Halle Berry. No, that doesn't seem to work for you. What seems to work for everyone is getting the best politicians at the top. And that's called meritocracy, and that really is what's best for everyone. If they end up being a bunch of white males, shrug, sorry, seethe. But when you sit there and you go, I have an idea of what's best for everyone, I'm going to enforce it. That's called Stalinism. It's not what the West was based on. It's what 100 million deaths is based on. So, we support Black Lives Matter, and we support all 2 of their valid points. Did you like that? Okay, check it out. I got a whole comedy show called How's It Going, Eh? You just have to click right here to subscribe.